Kevalava Kati Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalava Kati Satma Vandomui Sadhavana Mate Vandomui Sadhavana Mate Hare Sadevai Evavato Vijayai Jahara Sadevai Evavato Vijayai Krishna Prakti Hoi Jaha Hoite Krishna Prakti Hoi Jaha Hoite Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikya Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikya Arno Koriyo Mane Asha Arno Koriyo Mane Asha Shri Guru Charannerati Ese Utamagati Shri Guru Charannerati Ese Utamagati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asa Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asa Chakudana Dimoje Jame Jame Pravose Chakudana Dimoje Jame Jame Pravose Viviagyan Vide Prokashito Viviagyan Vide Prokashito Prema Bhakti Yahote Avidya Vinasayate Prema Bhakti Yahote Avidya Vinasayate Etegai Jahara Charito Etegai Jahara Charito Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Gana Mokera Jivana Gana Mokera Jivana Prabhu Korodoya Deho More Parachayo Prabhu Korodoya Deho More Parachayo Eveya Sagusu Tribubana Eveya Sagusu Tribubana Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu Okana Mokera Jivana Okana Mokera Jivana Prabhu Korodoya Deho More Parachayo Prabhu Korodoya Deho More Parachayo Ella Gusu Tribhuvana Prabhupada Patita Pavana Prabhupada Patita Pavana Gurudev Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutane Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Tunjavadi Pashatya Desantarine Ayasti Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitagora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Nitagora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jaya Krishna, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Krishna. Jai Gora Premanandi.
Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Deputy Founder Charge Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Charge Stota Dasata Sri Srimad. The Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारी गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवन की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवदीप मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगमाई की जय। जमुनामाई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। श्रीमती तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। बृहत् मृदंग की जय। Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Pramanande Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Gaurang. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radhesham Ki Jai. So thanks for Jiva Goswami Prabhu for leading Guru Puja Kirtan today. And welcome also to Jiva Goswami, who is visiting from New York. So today is Sunday, so there's a lot of vegetable cut-up going on in the kitchen. If you would like to help, you can go there. They'll be very happy to get your help on Sunday morning cut-up. You can also hear everything in the kitchen if you decide to go there. Otherwise, you can bring your vegetables in the temple room. You can cut here, and you can hear, and you can also see the DVD that we're going to show, Memories of Srila Prabhupada, in a few minutes. I will read from this book. This is a new book that came out, and it is meant for all ISKCON devotees to study it very carefully. It's actually a very important historical document, which was prepared by Ravindra Swarup Prabhu for the GBC. It's called Srila Prabhupada, the Founder Acharya of ISKCON. So we've already started. This is page 40. The article presupposes a controlling metaphor used by community members to understand the form and activity of their Gaudiya Math institution, that of a robustly growing tree whose flourishing limbs and branches extend to cover the world. This metaphor is derived, of course, from the 9th chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, the desire tree of devotional service. There, Mahaprabhu is depicted as a gardener who brings to earth This desire tree, the Bhakti Kalpataru, plants the seed in the soil of Navadvip and cultivates the plant, which grows to bestow the fruit of Krishna Prem to all everywhere. Mahaprabhu is not only the gardener, but also the tree itself. Krishna Prema Mara Tadu Swayam, as well as the enjoyer and the distributor of its fruit. The Gaudiya Math institution is the manifestation of that tree. Its seed, so the members understood, had been planted and watered in Navadvip, Mahaprabhu's very birthplace, by his agent Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who retired to the sacred place from 1905 to 1914, chanting 192 rounds a day, in fulfillment of a vow to chant 1 billion names. Much of this yajna he executed in a cottage he had built on property where, on March 27, 1918, he took sannyas. On the day he took sannyas, writes Bhakti-Vikas Swami, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also established the Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur, revealing service to the deities Sri Sri Gandharvika Giridhari, alongside the deity of Lord Chaitanya, before whom he had performed his vow of chanting of 1 billion names. In this way, the tree of the Gaudiya mission took root in sacred soil and soon began to grow and branch out, notably in the form of the Sri Gaudiya Math, established in 1920 by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at 1 Ultadingi Junction Road, Calcutta. This image of the institution is presented in the very first issue of the Harmonist in June of 1927. The Gaudiya Math, its message and activities, opening with rhetorical flourishes that give voice to the spirit of dynamic growth, depicts the Gaudiya Math with the image of a tree rooted in Mayapur, the soil of the advent of Mahaprabhu, branching to Calcutta and spreading throughout India. By the grace of the Lord of the Gaudiya Math, of the Gaudiyas, the message of the Gaudiya Math is today not unknown to anyone in the whole of Gauda Desh, and not in Gauda Desh only, but over Naimisharanya, Ayodhya, Prayag, Kashi, Sri Vrindavan, Mathura on one side, and also over Dakshinatya, southern India, and everywhere throughout the tracts of Orissa on the other. Thus it has been well proclaimed, the message of the Gaudiya Math, the principal branch of the Sri Chaitanya tree, which is a root implanted in the soil of the advent of Sriman Mahaprabhu, Sri Mayapur Navadvip Dham. Over Gauda Mandal, Kshetra Mandal and Braja Mandal, the message of the Gaudiya Math has gone forth. Upon the opening in October of 1930 of the relocated Gaudiya Math at Bagh Bazar, which was expressly constructed to be headquarters for worldwide propagation of Gauravani, the harmonist of that month opened with an explication of the deep meaning of the event. Quote, the Gaudiya Math is the embodiment of the highest service of Sri Sri Radha Govinda, made manifest in a modern urban environment by the grace of the Acharya. It is the embodiment of the ideal of service of a single individual who does not belong to this or any age, nor to this world. By the self-sufficing wish of this single individual, the ideal of his service of Sri Sri Radha Govinda has been manifested in the busiest city of this country in the form of an institution for the practice and propagation of the most perfect service of the Supreme Lord. This institution owes its existence both as regards initiative and growth to His Divine Grace Paramahamsa Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. End of quote. Thus, the Gaudiya Math is made to appear and to flourish by the grace of the Acharya. Here is its provenance. Quote, the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta is the principal branch of Sri Chaitanya Math of Sridham Mayapur. The distinction between the Gaudiya Math and Sri Chaitanya Math is all analogous to that to that between one lamp lighted by another. The Gaudiya Math is the expansion of the Chaitanya Math in a visible form into the heart of the world. Sri Chaitanya Math is eternally located as the original source, even when it is manifested to the view of the people of the world, in the transcendental environment of the eternal abode of the divinity. The activities of the Gaudiya Math and of the sister branch Maths are, however, essentially identical with those of Sri Chaitanya Math and are categorically different from the ordinary activities of this world. So all these are different history and leading up to Srila Prabhupada being the founder Acharya. So all these here are information about the Gaudiya Math and so forth. So I'll stop there and I'll continue next time. So today we'll have our Sunday feast program as usual. Kirtan begins at 4:15 and then there's announcements at 5 and then there will be the class. We're happy to have with us today Sriman Hari Sauri Prabhu, one of the very close associates of Srila Prabhupada and servant of Srila Prabhupada, who is here and will be giving the Sunday Feast lecture today. And he'll also be speaking Tuesday night and Wednesday night, I think, this week on Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. And we'll show memories of Srila Prabhupada, number 5. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, here are the devotees who have assisted their guru in dressing the deities today. Sri Sri Radhesham were dressed by Nitai Priya, Chota Radhesham by Sachi Sundari, Sri Sri Krishna Balaram by Mother Jayanti, Chota Krishna Balaram, Mother Devaki, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai by Mother Kaveri, Chota Gaur Nitai by Mother Govinda Mohini, and the Gurus and Lord Nrsingadev by Krishna Kripa Mohi Prabhu.
And Prabhupada never spoke about it.
At another time, there was a discussion about those of us who at the time were beginning to teach others how to distribute the larger books, the Srimad Bhagavatam and the hardback Bhagavad Gitas. So we at that time, it was the early 70s again, and we were traveling from temple to temple. And the question was whether or not we should put on displays for the devotees, performing for them a book distribution skit. One of us acts as the non-devotee receiving a book, the other of us acts as a devotee. We're passing each other on the street. Devotee flags the non-devotee down and has an exchange ending up in a book sold. So we asked him, should we perform these skits as we go around and preach to the devotees? And he said, no, it's a little unnatural. He said, but you should travel, you should preach, and you should teach these devotees who you're preaching to how to be sincere. And his point was that was the essence of book distribution, of preaching. And he went on to articulate that preaching depends on circumstances. So, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but his point was that in dealing with each person, you're going to have a different audience. Therefore, there's no static or rote way to distribute a book or to preach. But he said by teaching the devotees to be sincere, and he made one of those, at least what I thought at the time was one of those wild sweeping gestures, which was probably just pointed to his heart, but to me, in my mind, he was waving and very sweeping and pointed to his heart, and he said, then if you teach them to be sincere, the real teacher from within will give them information according to circumstances, will teach them how to distribute the books.
Garga Muni had obtained this apartment for him. There was a dump. Oh, tight Garga Muni, bless him. It was a dump. And Srila Prabhupada walks in with Govindadasi. Govindadasi also has a very interesting, blessed rasa relationship with Srila Prabhupada. She used to tell him, this will never do. And that was part of the requirement for being a good servant with Srila Prabhupada, is that you had to be almost parental with him, because his health was not well, and so you had to have a heavy hand sometimes, which to most people is unthought of with Guru. It just so happens that Srila Prabhupada, because of our Gaudiya Sampradaya, so, and being a pure devotee, was so real that he identified his relationship with each individual devotee. And he expected you to respond. If you were going to be a debate, then he wanted to debate. If I wanted to cook and massage and make his home clean and nice always, he would give me that facility till I didn't want it any longer. Well, he comes into this place. Govindadasi says to Gargamuni, "This will never do. We have to find another location. Srila Prabhupada, what do you feel?" Prabhupada's from Calcutta. This was, and Govindadasi says, no, I'm sorry. I have to put my foot down. So she and Gargamuni take off to go find another location. And I'm there with Srila Prabhupada. So there's a television in this place. So he says, "Turn the TV on." I was like, turn the TV on? Now, I only just joined a month ago. And I'm told, when I joined, oh no, we don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do drugs. In fact, I remember taking my last LSD experience on my way to move into the temple. So I said, okay, I turned the television. Because we were nothing there. I mean, we were chanting. He was always chanting. Somehow. So this washing machine commercial comes on. And the washing machine is agitating, and it's stick cartoon characters. And Prabhupada is almost on the floor, laughing hysterically. He said, "Oh, you Western people." He said, you make a box to wash your clothes in, and then you sell it for an exorbitant amount of money, and you have them assume characters. Kirby and Mrs. Kirby and, well, we watched, I laughed, of course, frightfully I laughed, because I didn't know whether I should laugh or what, It wasn't until later on that I understood what my position was, in serving him, that is. So he was chuckling, so he wanted me to turn the station. So I turned the station. He wants more commercials. He thought that they were the most interesting, bizarre display of material life he'd ever seen. That they actually make film about sense gratification needs. Okay. Well, that was my first, I guess you would say, experience with Srila Prabhupada that was not in the mode of awe and reverence.
Another thing which I thought was unique about Prabhupada's, you might call it Prabhupada's innocence, having to do with our Western ways and our interpretation of things. There was a discussion, and it was about book distribution and Sankirtan, street preaching. So we said, I think it was Tripurari who said, so in many temples they're not having Sankirtan class, meaning that they weren't teaching each other how to distribute books and inspiring each other about street preaching and Sankirtan in a class format. That was Tripurari's intent. But Prabhupada took it in an entirely different way. He said, no Sankirtan class? And we all in unison said, no, Prabhupada, because we were expecting him to suggest, oh, this should happen everywhere and you should head it up, and we thought we were going to get some new service. He said, no Sankirtan class? We said, no, Prabhupada, they're not doing that. And then he asked maybe 3 times, no? He said, there should be Sankirtan every class. Before class and after class, always Sankirtan. So he was thinking that there was no chanting of the holy names prior to the classes, to the regular Bhagavatam Gita morning and evening classes. But we were thinking that there was no technique class about preaching, which was in one sense a foreign concept to him, that there would be techniques for this.
So the next time that I had the chance to meet Srila Prabhupada was in India. I went to India with Guru Kripa in the summer of 1971. Srila Prabhupada was already in India at the time, traveling in various places. So he stayed in Bombay, Guru Kripa stayed in Bombay, and I went to Calcutta. And one of the first times I saw Srila Prabhupada, he was in his room with various respectable Indian gentlemen. So after the Indian gentlemen left, a few devotees were there. Bhavananda was there, Jayapataka, Ribhatinandan. And I asked Srila Prabhupada a question. It was one of the first times I really had the chance to ask Srila Prabhupada like a one-on-one question. I said, Prabhupada, there has been considerable controversy over your statements that the materialistic scientists never really went to the moon. A lot of people really don't understand this. I says, we accept your statement. I'm your disciple. I accept it. I firmly believe it. I says, but how do you explain this? So then Prabhupada went and he put his hand up in the air and he said, as far as I'm concerned, they never went. And he went to an elaborate list of reasons, all the way to the idea that the moon is a luminous body, very effulgent, self-effulgent body. And it is contradictory to say that they have recovered some dust and stones from a luminous body. Then he went on and gave another reason, that according to the Vedas and the Bhagavatam, you cannot go to another planet without a suitable body. You cannot just force entry into another planet. And then he kept giving an example of America, that you cannot just force your entrance into your country. You have to take a proper visa, go to the immigration department, then you can come in. And then Prabhupada said, he gave another example that about the days of the week, that in all cultures, all Vedic cultures, of all ancient cultures, the day starts with Monday, Tuesday, the moon is usually always the first. And then Prabhupada went like that and gave so many examples. He says in his opinion, they did not go to the moon, but to a planet between the moon, Rahu. He says they cannot access the moon. Then he also explained as early as 1971 how the moon was far above the sun, which seems contradictory to the common understanding of scientists. So in this way, Prabhupada was very, very relaxed. Because at that time, when Prabhupada first announced this, one of his servants that was there at the time, Purushottam, had brought a TV set in Prabhupada's room. Devotees had told me this. And he tried to show Prabhupada the entire letting. Prabhupada still. They cannot go there. So over that incident, that devotee had left and gone on to various other pursuits. But Prabhupada was very firm about this. He did not compromise. So that was a very interesting point.
One afternoon, I was bringing him, after he wakes up, his whatever he had, a little rasgula and something. And I started to enter the room, and the sun was going down, kind of. And he was looking, this room faced out on the backyard. And the whole room seemed purple and gold. There was this energy. And Srila Prabhupada was chanting and crying. And crying. Tears of ecstasy. Well, I mean, far be it from me, we hadn't even had nectar devotion yet. So I get alarmed. But I don't do anything. I back up. I back up out of the room with the tray. And I go to Govindadas. I say, well, Govinda, what's happening? Is Prabhupada okay? Is he having a fit? She says, no. She said, that's just Srila Prabhupada having a relationship. That's Krishna consciousness, Sudama. I said, wow. Well, I went back in about 5 minutes later. Srila Prabhupada said he still was there. And he stopped me from leaving this time and said, Sudama, don't leave. I'm crying because of the mercy of my Guru Maharaj, that I am allowed, by his mercy, to see Krishna, which I see right very now as we speak, over these grasses. Oh man, it was so heavy that I started crying. He said, why are you crying? Oh God. Because I said to him, you are so powerful and merciful. I've never met a soul like you. And he said, that is Krishna's arrangement.
Another time on the same subject, I think it was myself, one of the local book distributors at whatever location we were, asked how it was that Srila Prabhupada had had such success in his own distribution of his own first volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam upon his arrival in New York on the East Coast. And he thought for a minute, and his response was that, no, I do not think I'm almost quoting, I do not think it was my success. I think it was just that they saw me as some fancy Indian gentleman, and therefore they took whatever I asked them to take. So he never came across as if there was a technique or this, it was just he thought it was his Indian flair, his fancy Indian gentlemanliness.
The first time he started this annual meeting at the Mayapur land there, at that time there was just a little hut near the entrance gate there. So Prabhupada would stay in this hut every night and give darshan to the devotees, and we would stay with him for hours, and we would ask questions and answers like that. And many of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers came to see Srila Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada had this idea of trying to engage all of his godbrothers and make some kind of an alliance, like a united front where all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas could preach together. And he wanted this Mayapur project was his way of trying to unite all of his godbrothers and get them to participate in this plan. So several of Prabhupada's godbrothers came there, and some of them were fairly critical of him using the name Prabhupada. And we were in the room, so they requested us at that time, Guru Kripa, Shyamasundar, Rishi Kumar, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Prabhas. Many of us were told to leave the room, and we were just outside watching through the bamboo and straw walls what was going on, and the voices were being raised, and Prabhupada was there, and then Prabhupada rang his bell and asked his devotees to bring out his stationery. And he was speaking in Bengali and explaining to them. The word Prabhupada came out so many times, Prabhupada and Swamiji. And then afterwards, Prabhupada called all of us into the room, and he started to give this example of how Radharani in the spiritual world, she's the topmost gopi. She's the favorite of Krishna. And all of the other gopis, they assist Radharani, and there is no envy whatsoever. Everybody is assisting the favorite gopi of Krishna, Radharani. So he says, in the same way, if one is a true devotee, he does not become envious, like some of my godbrothers like that. Prabhupada was not pleased with the materialistic attitude of being critical of him for us as his disciples to call him Prabhupada. And Prabhupada even says, I do not call myself Prabhupada. My disciples call me Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was very kind on one hand, trying to engage his contemporary godbrothers, and at the same time he was very firm, trying to protect his disciples and trying to preach out Krishna consciousness like that.
One day a letter came, Prabhupada was in India. What had happened was that Prabhupada was having these big public programs in India. And one evening, some man challenged Prabhupada. He was actually a Arya Samajist. Anyway, he was saying that, oh, Swamiji, you have come here to India with your Western chalas and But we know all these things. This is our culture. We have all these things, and so better you go, to the other places, do your work there. And all right, you've been to the West, but what about the Muslim countries? What about Pakistan? You should go to Pakistan and preach there and make them devotees. So this was in a big public, one of these pandals, thousands of people. So Prabhupada said, so you are challenging us to go? And he said, yes, I challenge you, yes, you challenge you, you should go to Pakistan. So Prabhupada said, all right, we will go. And then Prabhupada wrote a letter to me, immediately go to West Pakistan, he wrote me, and he wrote to Gargamuni, you immediately go to East Pakistan. And we got these letters, and we immediately left. I don't remember everything was said, but Prabhupada said, immediately go. Immediately meant, boom. The next day, I didn't have any money. They paid for my bus from Florida to New York. I didn't go. And we left immediately. Gargamuni, he had money and he flew. I had to go by overland to India, taking hitchhiking, buses, trains, whatever way I could go. That's how I went. And then, of course, the war was beginning. Actually, then Prabhupada then found out about the war situation and the hostilities between Pakistan and India were. This is the 1971 war. Prabhupada wrote a second letter saying that I don't advise you to go at this time. But we never got that letter. We'd already left. So we walked right into a war situation. Gargamuni, especially East Pakistan. I mean, when his plane landed at the airport, there was no transportation to go into the city because there was no cars on the road. He had to walk from the airport into the city. But just by what we went, of course, in our sannyas dress and so on. Just by the time he arrived in the city, he had to walk something like 20 miles from the airport to the city. By the time he arrived in the city, he had thousands of people following him, just wanting to know who he was, what was going on, and so on. So anyway, we were preaching and we were trying to do something, but it was so difficult. And I was in Karachi. Just north of Karachi is the Sindh Desert. It's the hottest place in the world. It averages 125 degrees. I mean, it's the hottest place in the world. I'm right there, and it's in May. It's the hottest month. I was just so sick, and with the dysentery and so many things. So, and I had no books, and the people are spitting on me on the street and threatening to put a knife in my back. And we had Kirtan, and people would come up and just, rub off the tilak, and spit, and what a situation. So anyway. So then, finally, I sent a telegram to Prabhupada, who's in Bombay. Of course, Karachi and Bombay is just not far at all, a few hundred miles. I said, can I get out of here? I mean, I wasn't supposed to be there anyway. Prabhupada said, don't go. And there we were. So Prabhupada said, all right, come immediately. So then, and then, of course, they made those reports. It appeared in the Pakistani papers first published it, and then the Indian press picked it up, and they published it. 4 Hare Krishna missionaries shot. And And Prabhupada's in and the Kuranda came and showed Prabhupada the newspaper, and it didn't give any names, but it said 4 Hare Krishna public missionary shots. So the Gargamuni was there with Pushta, I was there with Jagandiva. So there were 4 of us, although we were in different east and west. Shot, Prabhupada, my God, shot, you know, and so Prabhupada was very disturbed, and they had Kuranda go to the embassy and find out this, that, and everything. And actually, Prabhupada thought we had been shot. So then I sent a telegram. So Prabhupada said, yes, come immediately. It said, come immediately, Bhaktivedanta Swami, 4 words. Oh, those are the best 4 words. And, I mean, to get out of the country was a big thing. Somehow we were able to get out. And so I came to Bombay, and I found out where Prabhupada was staying, Akash Ganga. And I went there, and I walked in the room, and Prabhupada, I mean, he just immediately got up from his seat, and he came over, and he just put his arms around me and just hugged me to his chest, and then he took his hands, and he was just putting his hands all over me. I mean, just like a mother. You know, the child had been hurt or something, and the mother is just seeing that the child is still intact. I mean, he was just so. He just embraced. It was just so.
He, at that time, told me that he saw Krishna as a cowherd boy. Another thing that I don't know from cowherd boys to anything. I just know him. That was my life. So if he said so, okay. And he talked about how beautiful the grass was. And how fortunate he was to have the mercy of his Guru Maharaj. The very same house, the very same week, he had me call Tamal and a whole group of others. Hansaduda and Himavati had just flown into town. He was asking for sannyas. This is way before this was fashionable, which he always did ask for sannyas. So we all go to Srila Prabhupada's room. Purushottam, I can't remember, Himavati, Hansaduda, Tamal, Dayananda, and his wife, who began the LA temple, Nandarani, and we enter Srila Prabhupada's room. Again, this was in the afternoon. Oh boy, and Srila Prabhupada is sitting at his desk, crying and chanting. Tears are flowing down his face. And we all enter the room, and we're not aware of this because, we're just aware of ourselves. And we pay our obeisances and sit up. There's Srila Prabhupada, crying. And Hansaduda said, all glories to you, Srila Prabhupada. Swamiji, I think we called him. And we all started crying. And this was a mystic power possessed by the pure devotee to allow neophytes at our level to take us in. We were all crying, and we had no idea why. We just felt this overwhelming mercy. We fell down again and paid obeisances. We hear Srila Prabhupada's voice say, why you are crying? Sit up. And we said to him, Srila Prabhupada, we're crying because to watch you like this you are so merciful. No, he said. Is my Guru Maharaj once again, who's by his mercy I've been nothing. Well, These were my first lessons of the acceptance of a pure devotee of the Guru.
I was outside his room in Mayapur. At that time, it was at what's now a long guest building there. And he was on the 3rd floor, as I remember. And he walked out. I was just sitting there chanting some japa. It was at night. And I had chanted japa there previously. And one of the authority folks there at the temple had told me, who was, a Mayapur resident, had told me, once this gate's closed, I don't want it open for anybody. I don't care what they say. So I thought, okay, I'm up late chanting my rounds and helping to guard, and I'll help you out with that. So there's some lady downstairs. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and she's shaking on the door, on the gate, the very gate that Prabhupada said not to, that this temple authority had told me not to open. So I just sat there. I didn't move a muscle. I just kept chanting my japa, and then I heard this lady's voice, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, and the gate was rattling back and forth. And so I got no response from them. I was ignoring this ruckus that was occurring downstairs on the local authorities' plea. And finally it got so bad that Prabhupada came out. And he queried, he was a little bit upset, so much noise, and he said, why are they banging? I said, well, Prabhupada, so-and-so told me that after these gates were locked, they should just remain that way, and we weren't going to do anything about it, no matter who knocked or who wanted to get in. He shook his head, just almost disgusted. He said, come on. So he and I walked down 3 flights of stairs. You know they are there in Mayapur, back and forth together. He personally unlatched the gate for a lady who was a very hard-working, sincere cook in Mayapur. She had been there for a long, long time and was just like the backbone of their kitchen, from what I gathered. He let her in. They chatted for a while. He personally closed and locked the gate behind them. And as we were walking up, and he was sort of looking at me disdainfully, and I was feeling real bad that I hadn't done the needful at the time, he said, why didn't you let her in? And I just repeated, well, so-and-so told me not to do this. And he chuckled. Actually, it was a full-blown laugh, and he said, do not listen to that so-and-so Swami. So from that point on, I just let anybody in who wanted to come in, and I figured that the sannyasi's authority had been superseded.
At one time, Prabhupada asked Subal Swami, who in those days was very, very, still today, very learned and very scholarly. And his godbrother O.B.L. Kapoor was there, so he asked Subal Swami, please describe the 3 different kinds of Vishnus. So Subal Maharaj went to this elaborate explanation of the Mahavishnu and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu and their function and the quotes from the Bhagavatam and this and that. And Prabhupada was so pleased. He was speaking then in Hindi with O.B.L. Kapoor, and they were shaking their heads and laughing and joling. And Subal was trying to understand what was going on. He was like looking at them. But what was going on is that Prabhupada was appreciating his devotee learning the philosophy so nicely and explaining like that. And O.B.L. Kapoor was shaking. Because in India, when they appreciate something, sometimes they shake their head like it's like in a seemingly negative way. So Prabhupada was just very, very, appreciative of the devotee giving this wonderful explanation. And Prabhupada would say, and interject that time in English, says, just see how they have learned this and that. So Prabhupada reciprocation was just so very, very sweet.
So we arrive at the temple, and I had this huge portrait of Srila Prabhupada in the anteroom where you take your shoes off. Well, he hit the ceiling. Even you, he said, have become infected. I said, what? Srila Prabhupada? He says, yes, I can see it. And he chastised me for like 2 hours. So many discrepancies, he says, I see here. Okay. Well, I'm crushed, needless to say. And then he attacked, he says, yeah, and you have not made devotees? Oh my God, well, that was like my worst nightmare, because that's what I always heard from my other GBC, because I was one of the first GBC appears was, come on, Siddhama, what are you doing over there? Well, Japan is not an easy cookie to open. Srila Prabhupada told me that, Sudama, you have been a Japanese in your previous life. I learned fluently to speak and think and dream in Japanese in a year. It was very bizarre. Of course, I had to go to college, get a little help, but grammar. The next day was Vyas Puj. So this was really the initial Vyas Puj that everyone follows in ISKCON, even if they do it today. We were taught in Tokyo. Prior to that, we all had it wrong, incorrect. Srila Prabhupada arrives at the temple. I had done something blunderous, like had the whole, I don't know, I was just improvising the ceremony, I don't know. Srila Prabhupada sits on the Vyasa-san, there's a guest here, and he goes off with anger. How dare you bring me here? And this is to all of us. How dare you bring me here? How do you insult the spiritual master? Oh, he was really. And we were, what could we say? The place you could hear a pin drop. I was embarrassed, I cried, I went out, I left the room, I cried, I displeased him. I go back into the temple room, teeny little, the temple room wasn't even as big as this. He says, I have some pictures, photographs for you. You can maybe use. He says, all right, tomorrow we will observe Vyas Puj the correct way. I will instruct. Now take me home. He was pissed. Well, sure enough, the next day, that evening, he told me what I needed to get. The next day he came in, we all did it all over again, just the way we have done it for years now. And he lectured on the spiritual master's mercy. No kidding. That evening, he got a phone call from New Vrindavan, from Hare, stating that Vishnu John and Subal and Gargamuni and Brahmananda had kind of, the heat of the mugginess of West Virginia had gotten to them. And they had upset a great many devotees who were leaving because they were preaching that Srila Prabhupada was the speaker of the Gita, or something to a kinship of that. And Srila Prabhupada was relieved. He said, finally the bubble has broken. I knew, he said, that my godbrothers were behind this. And the result of this is that they have been listening, these others, to Achyutananda. It was deeper than just he's the speaker of the Gita, that we were not qualified to worship Radha Krishna in the Western world because we were malechas. Little did we know just how insidious and power-hungry and envious Prabhupada's godbrothers were, because Srila Prabhupada happened to be the one to begin the fructification of Lord Chaitanya's prediction. Every town and village. The rest of them, Tirtha couldn't even do it in London. He had to come back. Here we got, 6 or 8, white girls and boys going and chanting and turning all of London out. And all of Europe, for that matter. Anyway, he was glad that they had done this, because now he wanted them to go out and preach. They couldn't stay in temples for too long, and they had to use the temple, the books. They get the books from the temple, but they couldn't lecture, and they had to go preach it. And that's what they did. They split up. Ramananda and Gargamuni, they went down South Florida, I don't know. This was their penance. And Srila Prabhupada got ready to leave Tokyo to go, this has got to be 1971, to go to India. he said, now I have opened the West. He said, this is my personal program to take my white dancing elephants.
I remember the letter exchange between Srila Prabhupada, Kurandar, and Kirtanananda Maharaj over the topic. Kirtanananda was very upset about the non-devotional clothing being used, and Kurandar thought, what the heck, it works. So they were both approaching Prabhupada by letter in an attempt to influence him to their own view. And I don't remember a lot of details, just that the exchange was there. And it happened, as a matter of fact, Kurandar would show me these letters when we'd come back, and we were just beginning to experiment with one of these early parties that I was on was one of the first, if not the first, to begin regularly wearing the long pants. And at that time, it was just a ski cap, a skull cap, or something that would cover the fact that we didn't have any hair. So Kurandar, and I guess it was in order to encourage me, because he felt he was getting the nod in this controversy. He would show me the letters that were coming to him and explain to me the letters that Prabhupada was getting and sending on the other side to Kirtananda. But at least in the letter to Kurandar, it was quite clear that he said his mood was whatever's going to maximize our effect. And when it came up that one of the arguments was, well, they dress like hippies when they go out and do it. So he responded, they shouldn't dress like hippies, but that doesn't mean that they can't dress like their non-devotee audience. So that, as far as I heard, was the last word in it. And from that point on, we began to distribute books and approach the public in non-devotional clothing.
Another time, Prabhupada was sitting in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple near the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And this Brijbasi couple, this was in the morning after a Nectar of Devotion lecture. They came there. There were some villagers, simple Brijbasi folks, very devoted, very, very simple, very, very attracted to Prabhupada. And we sat there, and Prabhupada had this incredible exchange with them in Hindi, and we were thinking, who are these people? I mean, we were thinking they were not even initiated, they're not even devotees, they're not even in ISKCON, they're not this and they're not that. But Prabhupada spent over an hour talking to these people and laughing, and it was like he was experiencing increasing ecstasy over the course of this hour. And we could not understand Hindi, we could not understand what they were saying, and Prabhupada was laughing and talking about Krishna. You could hear about Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj and the Gopas and the Gopis and the Yamuna and this and that. And then Prabhupada was just like amazingly in total bliss. And later on I found out from another devotee, Prabhupada said that some of these people are actually liberated souls. They're very, very exalted transcendentalists, although they may look like ordinary farmers or some village people. So this was one way of Prabhupada telling us to be very respectful of the inhabitants of the Dham.
My first lesson of making halva alone was at 2 in the morning when Hare arrived suddenly from New York. Srila Prabhupada said, Sudama, go make halva. Well, I'd never made halva. Well, fortunately, I made it correctly, if not too sweet. But not to mess with Prabhupada. He told me, ooh, Krishna likes this. He says, I know, you have made this very sweet. He said, that's why he is Bhagopal. Because he is the butter thief. He is taken from the kitchen. He likes the sweetness. He says, Sudama, you have a knack for this. You should make more sweets. I said, yes, but Srila Prabhupada, I don't have the patience for sweets, for sweet making. He says, yes, we have to preach in this age. Go out and chant Hare Krishna. Never mind Rasgula and Rasamalai, and who has time for this? Then he looks at Hare and myself and Govinda Das. He says, but they're so nectar. Hurry, go make it, he told me. So I came back, we all sat there and ate halva at 2 in the morning.
he liked to hear sometimes about the techniques. At one time, not techniques per se, but he liked to hear about what our approach to the public would be. And at one time it was discussed a bit. He said, "No, not tea stalls," as if that was beneath him. And he suggested that my success was with government men. I would always meet with the people, the government officers, in their offices. I would go to downtown Delhi, to the bigger cities, and offer my books to the bigger men, the more reputable men of society, and somehow or other try and preach to what he considered to be a higher class of people. The idea of him approaching the folks that were just sitting along in roadside tea stalls was not exactly his idea of how he had begun to do his book distribution.
So in January of 1973, we went to Bombay, where Prabhupada was residing near the ocean, at a gentleman's house named Kartikeya Mahadevya, who was a very prominent businessman and a life member and a very good friend of our movement. And Prabhupada used to give lectures every day in his room. So we came there and told Prabhupada that we had gone to this one place in South India, in Madurai, and we had been given this wonderful facility by this very wealthy man. And for 15 days we preached and tried every conceivable way to make life members and raise some funds for the Vrindavan temple, and we couldn't hardly get anything. We made like 2 life members in 3 weeks. And then we went to the next city, and all we did was kirtan, hearing, and chanting. And within 3 days we had made 22 life members. And we just couldn't understand. I said, what is this? We tried so hard, we endeavored, we worked, we preached. In one place we couldn't do anything, and the next place we just sat on our bottoms and all the money came. So when we came to Prabhupada, we related this incident to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, the problem with you two is you're too attached. You're too attached to the result. I says, our business as devotees is to try to please Krishna. And if you're very sincere, Krishna will personally make sure that you become successful. So you just try. Whether there's success or failure, that is not up to you. That is up to Krishna. So Prabhupada was very encouraging like that.
You know, in Hawaii, he would always tell me how conducive Hawaii was for spiritual advancement. In the Western Hemisphere, from what he's seen outside of India, that Hawaii was the prime place for spiritual advancement. Comfortable 80, 85 all the time, breeze, trade winds blowing. You could live with no shoes and just a pair of shorts, picking pineapples and bananas. What do you need more? And coconuts, fresh coconuts. Of course, I never lived like that, but, you know, he said that it is a perfect place for that. We talked about Samoans and different races. He said these people, he said, unfortunately, must have the worst karma on earth. He said, they eat pig, they look like a pig. You know. And Srila Prabhupada, as we're walking, and this whole Samoan family walks by us, and he says this, and I'm like, no, you know, because, but then I thought, wait a minute, I'm with the pure devotee. This is, I've got God on my side. This is, you know, in case they should get offended. But they weren't. Srila Prabhupada instead stopped because he was just talking about what they looked like and how ugly they were, and you literally using these terms, and preached.
I think Hawaii was one of Prabhupada's favorite places to poke fun at. Hawaii, I think, was a pet peeve for him. He saw both sides of it. He claimed it as a holdover from another era of goodness, but he also poked fun at Hawaii because the enjoying mood was so strong there. So, of course, he coined his famous reaction to the surfers there. He called them sufferers. And that was walking out along Ala Moana Beach and looking out on the right-hand side of the breakwater as you're facing the ocean. And someone typically said, Prabhupada, they're the surfers. I call them sufferers. And on another similar walk, he described the high-rise apartment buildings that were coming up like wild in Waikiki at the time. And he described how people become very attached to their 10th, 20th floor flat. So because of their attachment, they would gain the facility of coming back in a subsequent life as a cockroach in that very same flat.
And at one point, Prabhupada started a mock debate. There were several people in the room. He says, okay, now...
ลักๆก่อนเถอะเอาเข้าโบกัน